Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey y'all, welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. If this is your first time listening to the Collide Kids podcast, I am so glad you're here. Welcome. Thank you for listening today. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show for our kids only segment. That's where kids just like you get to be on the podcast. Well, I have a very important question for you. How much do you use technology? I have realized recently how many devices we have at our house and how much time I spend on those devices. We have iPads and phones and laptops and lots of stuff like that. And these are great tools for school and work and connecting with friends. But these tools require a lot of responsibility, and therefore, families need to work together to use these tools in the right way. So that is why I am thrilled to introduce you to my guest today, and her name is Titania Jordan. Titania is the CMO and Chief Parenting Officer of Bark Technologies, an internet safety solution that helps parents and schools keep children safer across social media, text messaging, and email. Titania travels the country serving as tech expert, and her book, Parenting in a Tech World, was released in 2020 and is currently an Amazon best-selling title. Titania is a mom to a tween son, and they live in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, before we start the interview, I do want to point out that there is a lot of information for parents today. And this is a great episode for parents and kids to listen to together and have conversations about. So, if you're a kid listening by yourself, will you just pause this podcast and ask a parent or a trusted adult to listen with you today? And if you're a parent of younger children, I would recommend that you listen first before inviting little ears to join you. There are just some topics that we mention that may be sensitive or over the heads of my younger friends. Well, I am so excited about how much we're going to learn today. So here is my conversation with Titania Jordan. Titania Jordan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I'm really excited about this conversation and what we're going to talk about today. I think I have a lot to learn, I know. Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. It's such a fun question because there's so many layers, but first and foremost, I am a mom. I am a basically Atlanta native. I have a lot of different paths that brought me to my current career, which is the Chief Parenting Officer of Bark.us.
Okay.
And Bark.us, that's our website, is a company called Bark Technologies. And we help keep children safer online and in real life. So if I had to distill it down into the very, very smallest soundbite I could, that's me in a nutshell.
I love that. And I love your title, Chief Parenting Officer. That's so cool.
I think so too. I'm proud of it. It's not a title that every company holds, and it's a very important one.
Absolutely. Well, this is awesome. Okay. I always love to ask my guests before we get started to share something fun or funny, like a joke or an impression or fun story. Do you have anything you want to share with us?
I really do, as it relates to tech. And it's not so much a joke. It's just really ironic. And perhaps you all have heard this before, but it's truly ironic. So our whole lives, you and me and the adults listening, we've been told never talk to strangers. Never get into cars with strangers, never take candy from strangers.
Right.
And our kids are growing up in a world where we are literally letting strangers know our location, telling them what time we'd like to be picked up, getting in their cars without ever meeting them, taking candy if they offer it, mints, gum, etc., and just trusting that they'll get us to the place that we hope we're going. And for those of you who don't realize what I'm talking about Uber or Lyft or any other rideshare situation. So that to me is funny.
It is funny. That's so true. And you give them a 5-star if they give you a candy or a water bottle or something.
Yes. Thank you, stranger, for this candy.
That I don't know where it came from, but
Exactly.
I appreciate it.
Right.
That is hilarious. Well, okay. So let's get started. Let's talk about your job. You work at Bark. What does Bark do? Like, what does that mean?
So Bark Technologies started over 5 years ago, where our actually CEO, Brian Basin, was working at Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And which really cool, right? And he has 2 boys. And when his boys became of the age to utilize social media, technology, smartphones, given his background in both technology and social media, he was like, I can do this in a wise way with my kids. And then he saw the landscape and he was like, wow, there really isn't a great option out there. And over the course of probably a lot of thought and digging into what was out there and what the possibilities were, he left Twitter, started Bark. And the whole premise behind Bark is to monitor your child's social media, text messages, and email, but not in a heavy-handed way, not in a way that produces friction between parent and child. Bark is using artificial intelligence, Bark is using tech to scan over 30 social media platforms the content between your children's text messages, and not just keywords, the contents of their Google Drive at school and email and all of that. And when it finds a problem, when our tech or the artificial intelligence finds a problem, it will alert you as a parent. It will send you a text or an email with a snippet, not everything. You're not going to get your child's full text history between that other child or adult, but you will get the snippet of the problem. And what we found at Bark is that actually helps in a few ways. It helps to build responsible digital natives because they don't feel like their parents are spying on everything. They're not having to take their phone at night and comb through everything for what they hope they might find. And it also gives parents insight into their children's world in a way that their children probably wouldn't surface to them, because as we all know, you ask how your kid's day was, they say fine.
Right. Sometimes we don't get a lot of information on that. So that's interesting. Like, I think there are a lot of people that are nervous. There are a lot of parents that are nervous about their kids being on tech and on social media. Yeah. But because of this pandemic, because of the lockdowns and different things we've had to go through, or quarantining for when you do have an illness, it's created more, I think, technology traffic, right? We are more accessible. We're using it a lot more than we probably used to or would allow before. So what do these parents do that are maybe nervous or trying to figure out the best way to start looking into this?
We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
Gosh, this is so hard. It really is. So first of all, just take a step back and realize that we are collectively parenting in a time, even before the pandemic, that no parents have ever parented in before.
True.
Then add a pandemic, right? All of the political and social justice and all of those things that took place over the past year on top of the pandemic. It is very, very hard just for us parents and caregivers to maintain our peace, our sanity, healthy mental health. Our kids aren't ready yet. They're kids. They're not adults. Their brains are not fully formed. They don't have the emotional intelligence needed to deal with life in general yet, much less amplified life via TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Google, etc. And so just keeping in mind that perspective of we're dealing with a new frontier and you have to give yourself some grace.
Yeah.
Second thing to think about is what we're doing during this time is not what we're going to be doing forever. And so most children are getting way more screen time than they did before the pandemic. And that kind of has to be as okay as it can be for now.
Yeah.
Should your child just not do school because they're getting too much screen time? No, you have to balance that.
Right.
Should your child have no social interaction with other kids because it means more screen time? No. So it's a hard balance you've got to strike right now. That said, I am so hopeful and so confident that we will be coming out of this sooner than later, right? We're over a year in. We can do hard things. We will be back to normal life again and in real life again. And so when that happens, because children are so resilient and their brains are, neuroelastic, let's prepare. Let's prepare to spend more time with in real life interactions. Let's prepare them for the world that they're in by knowing where they're spending their time, knowing the purposes of those platforms. For example, Snapchat. The purpose of Snapchat is to send disappearing photos. Why does your 10-year-old need to send a photo that disappears? If it can't live online forever, maybe that's not a good thing. So just thinking about it that way and talking about it with them is critical. You also can't suffer from the not my kid syndrome, which we all suffer from that, right? Like
Yeah.
we just do, right? My kid's not going to text. My kid's not going to bully someone. Most likely they will. The data shows that children are struggling with mental health at higher rates than ever. They're exposed to sexual content at higher rates than ever. It's just, there's more of it, and it's happening at a younger and younger age.
Like, I know it's kind of the only option, but are there ways that we could start to pull back? Like, now that things are beginning to open up a little bit more, should we start pulling back?
Yes. I mean, if you can get outside of your home, just get outside and remember nature, right? Like, hey, there's this thing called grass that grows in the ground all by itself. How does that happen? That's pretty fantastic. Not everything amazing needs to be on a screen, right? Like the whole world around us is full of these amazing, amazing miracles. And so embracing those is not only good for your soul, but it's good for forming new neural pathways in your brain that have nothing to do with the reward system of, games and social media. It's also really important to just emphasize in real life for your child's developing sense of confidence. If all they're seeing are people's perfected, filtered lives on all the places, they're going to think that their life is crap and that they don't measure up. And children's self-esteem and confidence is suffering in this day and age of filtered perfection, and followers and following count and engagement is the new indicator of worth. And so doing everything you can to help your child understand their worth as a human, their intrinsic gifts, whether they're an artist, an athlete, a scientist, whatever it is, pour into that and help them learn how to create or curate versus just consume.
I love that. That's a really good point. Let's talk about boundaries, because I feel like there are some things that we need to be aware of just physically. Like there's some things that we should be careful of, how much we're looking at our screens, how much we're consuming, how much we're not moving. What are some boundaries that we could begin to implement to kind of help us keep this in check?
Absolutely. So a really good rule of thumb, pandemic or no pandemic, is if your child has been in front of a screen for over 2 hours, just take a break. Just take a quick brain break. Children's bodies are not meant to be sedentary for long periods of time. They're growing, they're developing, they need physical activity for a variety of reasons. And so just take a break. It's good for your brain. It's good for your body. It doesn't mean they can only have 2 hours a day ever, But if it's 8 hours straight, it's just not healthy for anyone, adults too.
Yeah.
So take some breaks. You know, children need to sleep. We all need sleep. Sleep is critical, but children especially, for their mental health and their physical health. Their bodies are growing and their bodies regenerate at night. And so when children have access to tech and the internet, let's say after 10 p.m., it's addictive, keeps you up, stimulates you, makes it hard to fall asleep. And so removing that temptation from their bedroom, setting up parental controls to limit exposure both to screens and to content on those screens at times of the day is really important to preserve their mental health and well-being. And then finally, in terms of boundaries, you have to model appropriate behavior. If you're always on Instagram when they come to try to tell you something, that's going to stand out way more in their head than you giving them a lecture about it.
Yeah, that's convicting.
Guilty.
I know it's real. I think the hardest part is setting that good example and showing them how to have good boundaries. So what about like how can parents help their kids make better choices with technology? Like how can we help each other? How can parents help their kids?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. One thing with regards to screen time in general, I know that I was so frustrated with the situation in my house because my kid was having too much screen time. And me just saying to him, you've got to get off screens, you got to get off screens, you got to get off screens, didn't do anything. He needed to know why. And when I explained to him that games, screens, apps, phones, etc., stimulate the same part of your brain as sugar, or if you have an alcohol addiction, alcohol or drugs, like it's the addictive center of your brain. It's the pleasure center of your brain. Makes you want more of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to explain to him in an age-appropriate way how me letting him have so much of that was hurting him. And are we as a family going to let tech control us, or are we going to control our tech usage? And so reframing the conversation so that you're the ally with the child against whatever is going to come across their path is critical. Another thing too is don't be afraid to have the tough conversations. Like, is it easy to talk to your 8-year-old about pornography? No, absolutely not. But you have to do it because they're going to encounter it. And so there's books like Good Pictures, Bad Pictures that you can get on Amazon. Really helps to frame that conversation in an age-appropriate way. Don't be afraid to address mental health. You know, we've got to work to reduce the stigma around the fact that just like our elbows and knees can get cuts and bruises, so can our heart and our mind sometimes. But it's okay. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to ask for help, and there's hope. You can be okay. You can get better.
Yeah.
And so just being that safe place for them, and when they do encounter bad stuff, when they do make bad choices, because good kids will make bad choices, be their soft place. It's not necessarily always a good idea to take away the thing, because if they think they're going to be punished for surfacing things to you, they're not going to want to lose that access, and they won't do that again.
Yeah.
But helping them to navigate, why that was bad. Here's what we should have done instead. Here's who you need to apologize to. That's a better path. And it's hard. It's not easy. It's very hard.
For sure. Let me turn that question around. How can kids help their parents make better choices?
Yes.
Because we parents, we need help sometimes. And I think kids are always really good at keeping us accountable. So
yeah. So kids, you need to tell your parents, like, hey, you are my model. You are my model for responsible tech usage. If you're on your phone at dinner, answering emails from your boss, I'm going to learn that I'm never off the clock. Now, are we going to sometimes have to be on the clock at times we wish we weren't? And during family time, yes. Should that be the usual? No, that's not healthy. If you go into your parents' bedroom and mom and dad, instead of hugging, are both on their phones scrolling, you can look at them and say, like, hey guys, there's a human right next to you. you should try talking to each other. You know, like, come on. Just point out what you observe.
Yeah.
Your parents love you. As you get older, they crave time with you, quality time with you, because, they're no longer your whole world. Your friends are your whole world. Your social media is your whole world.
Yeah.
Your world is your whole world. It's no longer your parents. So anything that you can do to connect with them is really meaningful, and just be honest with them. Let them know what you're going through. Let them know when you're hurt because you went on Instagram and saw someone's stories and they're all at someone's house and you're not. Even though your parents may or may not be on Instagram, they know what it feels like to feel left out.
Yeah.
And they may not be able to have a good answer for you, but they can hug you, and they can hold your heart in their hand and walk through that with you together.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good point. Let's talk about, you mentioned some things about like maybe some scary things or some inappropriate things that kids might see online, or they might hear something that they shouldn't hear, see something, they might look up something accidentally. What should they do? Like, what should a kid do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, so, obviously we hope that every child has a trustworthy adult in their life. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. If you do have a trustworthy adult in your life, parent, aunt, older sibling, caregiver, babysitter, please don't be afraid to share with them what you saw and what questions you might have. If you don't have that person in your life, you have a pediatrician, you have a school counselor. These people are there for you to help you navigate what you encountered, whether you realize what it is or not.
Yeah.
For example, when Atlanta in particular was experiencing a lot of unrest in June following George Floyd, we didn't have the TV on in our house very much, but my son was on TikTok and he knew about all kinds of things that were happening, and I wasn't able to talk to him about it beforehand. But thankfully he came to me and asked, like, hey, are we okay? Are we safe? Will there be riots in our neighborhood? What do we need to know? What do you think happened here? Like, what is what I'm seeing on TikTok right? And we got to have these conversations around fact checking and getting your news from various sources, and how anyone in the world can create content now. So you have to make sure that it is the truth before jumping on a bandwagon.
Yeah. I think that's smart. I think it's so important to find that trustworthy adult that you can have that conversation with. Okay, so I have some good friends, some good mom friends. And so I did a little crowdsourcing. I told them I was going to talk to you today. And so I asked what kind of questions they might have, or what kind of questions maybe their kids have talked about. So one of the questions was about, and I thought this was interesting, what are the ages or maturity levels that kids need to be to use technology or certain apps or social media?
Wow. I'm glad that you added maturity levels because it's not just an age thing.
True.
Every 8-year-old is very different. Every 13-year-old is very different. Also, not every family lives under the same roof, right? So if you are in a dual household and you want to be able to communicate with your parent who's in the other household, you might get a smartphone earlier than your friend whose parents both live in the same household. So every case is different. But what parents need to realize is that if you do not do the diligence of making sure the tech that you give your child access to is as safe as possible, then they're going to encounter tough things, hard things, and things that they might not be ready to emotionally process. Just like you don't give them a bike for their birthday without making sure they have a helmet too. You don't let them drive a car without driver's ed and a seatbelt. You can't just give them a smartphone or a Nintendo Switch or an iPad or a Netflix subscription without doing your research, your diligence, knowing what they can encounter, and then making sure in an age-appropriate way they are aware of, hey, here are some of the dangers. If this happens to you, let's talk about it. When they go to the park, they know, like, don't talk to the strange man. Well, Same thing. When they go on PS4, if they're getting a message from somebody they don't know, do not respond. Do not respond. It could be a bot, but it could also be a tricky person. Or if you want to be more clear, you can say an online predator. If you give your child access to Instagram, you as the parent need to know that little magnifying glass search icon is a portal to everything and anything. Do you want to have the conversations with your children about how people Photoshop their bodies, get rid of acne, add six packs, add tans, make their teeth whiter? It's important.
Right.
It's trivial, but it's important. Do you want to have conversations about how there are websites where you can upload pictures of your feet and make money? Because there's a whole audience of people that like to pay money for feet. I mean, we're talking about that level of just that. I mean, that's where we are.
Yeah.
So you want to give them access, you need to be prepared to talk about what that access gives them access
And all
to.
of that. Yeah. Okay, so here's another question about friending people. Like what should our boundaries be with making friends online?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be super, super, super safe, you should only let your child and or encourage your child to connect with people they only know in real life. Not even friend of friends, only know in real life. And that's easier said than done, because in this culture of everybody wants to be famous, they're trying to get as many followers as possible. So, if your child has a private account, it's better. It's not 100% fail safe, but it's better. When you are going through those baby steps of teaching your child how to be a responsible digital native, if they do get a smartphone, don't immediately let them have every social media app. Just start with texting. Make sure there's only a few people in their contacts. It's their friends that that you've met. Hopefully you know their parents, and they're just texting with them. And help them navigate, kind words versus unkind words versus, kicking people out of chats and how that can hurt their heart. And you just have to start really small. From there, you can navigate, one app at a time when it is the right time. But I will say, we have a Facebook group called Parenting in the Tech World with close to 100,000 parents in it. And I can't think of a single parent that said, I wish I would have given my child access earlier. Flip side, I have plenty of parents that say, I wish I would have waited. I wish I would have waited.
Yeah.
My child did not need Snapchat at 10. My child did not need Instagram at 13.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think we just need to sometimes be willing to say no as parents.
Yes.
That's hard. We want to say yes and make them happy, but sometimes we just have to say no, and that's tough.
Be the parent. And you know what? You might make a mistake. I made a mistake when I let my 11-year-old son get TikTok earlier this year. In hindsight, right? Because hindsight's 2020. At the time, there was a pandemic, and he wanted to be able to communicate with friends, and he's an only child, and his friends were on TikTok. So knowing what I know, I let him do it anyway. We are now having the conversation about how he might not like it, but TikTok is not good for him. And here's why. And so we're going to delete it probably this weekend. And so if you have given your child access to something that you wish you hadn't, it's not too late to take it back. Much like if you let your child watch a movie from the 80s that, you felt like, oh, this is great, let's watch it. And then 10 minutes in, you're like, whoa, I didn't remember that. Wow. Like, it's okay to turn it off and say, this is not for right now. I was wrong.
That's happened quite a few times.
Right?
Thanks to Disney Plus and Netflix. You're like, oh, I love this movie growing up. And then you play it and you're like, why did I love this? Why did my parents let me watch this?
No.
That's so funny. Well, all of this really reminds me of that verse in Proverbs that says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. And I love that we can do that not only with the things that we think are spiritual and the church things, but also with technology. I
can't tell you, like, if you see I'm emotional, it's because I am, because that verse is so relevant to me right now, because I'm second guessing a lot of things. I now have a 12-year-old who is so smart and so bright, and there are things that are not going the way I had planned. But I am holding firm to that verse and that promise from God, that to stay the course. And when he has grown up, he will be on the right path. And so,
That's
yes, man, that verse, whoo,
Yes. And I
thankful
think it
for
is
it.
just do the best you can. Like if you have the knowledge, use it. If you have the ability, do it. Well, this has been so good and so enlightening and a good conversation, I think, to have, and also to hopefully help other parents and other families have this conversation as well.
Yeah.
You have a book called Parenting in a Tech World, and then you also mentioned a Facebook group. Can you tell us about those?
Yes. So the book I co-authored with dad of two, Matt McKee. He's great. And the book is called Parenting in a Tech World. You can get it on Amazon. We'll be releasing the audio book and ebook shortly this year too, if you want to wait and not get a hard copy. But if you want it now, get the hard copy on Amazon. Not mad at that. Also, if you would like free resources, just go on Facebook and search for the group Parenting in a Tech World. 100,000 parents almost will probably be there by the time this is live. And yeah, they are asking all the questions in there and getting all the support. So it's a great group of parents that are talking about these things and supporting each other and giving each other advice for parenting in the tech world.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for making these resources available, because I do think a lot of parents can sometimes feel isolated or alone in this because they want to
Yes.
make the best decision. So to know there's other parents that are going through this, there's other families that are having these conversations, I think is really important.
100%. You're not alone. We're all in this together. We're the first generation of parents that have ever had to do this, and we'll get through it. We will get through it.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to end my interviews by asking my guests to share a memory from when they were a kid.
Okay.
So do you have a memory that you can share from when you were a child?
I have tons of memories. I remember how I had divorced parents. And so when your parents are divorced in the 80s and they can't find a babysitter or afford a babysitter, they have to take you to work with them. And when they have to take you to work with them, and it's the 80s, you don't get to play on an iPad, right? You have to draw. And you don't get clear paper, you get the back of paper, right? So like the majority of my childhood was spent drawing on the back of flyers for whatever business my mom or dad worked for. So that is my memory of how I entertained myself. And not only that, but offices have tape. So making tape necklaces. Offices have staplers. Stapling is a lot of fun. I think that is a lost art for this generation. So anyway.
So true. Yeah, I feel like when I was growing up, the TV was our babysitter,
Oh, you got to watch TV as a kid. That's so cool.
So sorry to rub it in. Yeah, the TV was our babysitter. And now, like you said, iPads, like every kid at restaurants and every activity, they got an iPad in their hands. And so
God forbid they be bored. And that's actually a big thing I'd like to end with is every kid these days right now is so bored. And they have no idea how much they have at their disposal, unlike any other generation.
Absolutely.
That's something I don't have the answer to right now, but I really would like to help fix.
Right. Well, I think boredom is healthy because I think that's when the creativity starts, that's when they start to dive into some of that stuff. So boredom's a good thing.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Titania, for being on the show today. This was so good and so much resource that we get to tap into as parents. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me and for the work you're doing. I can't wait to share this far and wide.
Well, have you learned something new today? I know I have. I think as parents, we need to work on modeling that good behavior and showing our kids how to have boundaries with technology and screen time so we can work together and help each other. Parents and grandparents can help kids have boundaries, but you know what? Kids can help parents and grandparents have boundaries too. And I love the question she asked. She said, are we going to let technology control us? Or are we going to control technology? I also loved when she talked about finding and talking with a trustworthy adult. Please don't be afraid to share what you see online or what questions you might have about what you see, especially if there's something weird or scary or something you don't understand. Such good advice, and I hope that we continue to talk about this. Well, Titania talked a lot about the company she works for called Bark Technologies. Now, Bark Technology helps families manage and protect their children's digital lives. This is such a great resource for families. So go to my social media pages. I'm on Facebook and Instagram for more information, and there's a link so you can try it for free for 7 days, or visit bark.us to learn more. Also, if you use the promo code COLLIDEKIDS, COLLIDEKIDS, you get an extra 15% discount off any subscription you choose. Definitely something to check out. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part where you get to be on the podcast. So I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend Conner.
Hello, my name is Conner. I am age 10, and my favorite Bible verse is Psalms 119:105. Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light for my path.
Thank you, Conner. What a great verse to share, especially with our conversation today. God's word is a lamp to our feet. It's a guide. It's like a flashlight. It helps us know where to take the next step. So if we don't know what to do next, we could always turn to God and his word. Well, if you would like to be on the podcast, I would love to hear your favorite Bible verse, or maybe an encouraging quote you like, or a great joke you want to share. Just have a grown-up help you go to my podcast website, anchor.fm/collidekidspod, and on that page, there's a place for you to leave me a message. If you need more information about this, you can find all of it on my social media pages. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast, or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. If you're enjoying this podcast, share it with your friends and family. Let them know what you're learning about and what you like about the show. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. And give us a rating and a review on your podcast app. That actually helps other people find out about the show so they can listen too. Well, I'm so thankful for everyone listening today, especially the parents. My prayer for today's show is that lots of families have conversations about how to navigate technology and work together to set up boundaries so we can all be safe and happy. And like the verse that Conner just shared, we can turn to God's word for guidance whenever we need it. Well, in case no one has told you today, let me be the first to remind you, God loves you so much. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.